So let's get started and let's take a look at the actual lecture format. So just as you've seen, I start every lecture with the learning objectives. Learning objectives. And that is pretty much what I will use to signal to you what we want to do in a specific lecture. So these are my goals for a particular lecture. And it's very important to understand that I try to make these goals very single focused. I will talk more about this as we go through the other components. But yeah, it's my goal that we can really focus on one topic that I then break down into 3 to 4 learning objectives. In fact, we can write this down. This is usually 3 to 4 of them. And that is therefore our learning goals. So these are our goals for the individual lecture. So it's important that we understand where we want to go before we start something. Once we have done with that, then we will move on to the actual lecture. And the lecture usually ranges somewhere between 15 to 25 minutes, depending on how much time I need to get a particular topic across. And in fact, these are single focused, is what I call this, right? So single focused topics. So rather than throwing many topics simultaneously at you, I put a lot of effort into the breakdown of each lecture, and I try to keep the actual information to a concise level so that we can focus on a particular thing at a time, and so that we can also build them up one after another. In fact, this is a build-up lecture script, right? So build up. That means if you follow from the very beginning to the very end, every knowledge will be a building block that builds on a previous one. So that should help you to really follow the content and to be successful in this class if you don't fall behind. But I know you came here to learn, so therefore I facilitate that, and I'm looking forward to help you with that. All right, let's talk about the third part. The third part then is an actual example section. So we do examples. And the goal here is, the goal is to demonstrate the application of the theoretical knowledge. So I'm doing this to actually apply the knowledge that we learned on a theoretical level in the lecture. And I generally try to solve as many problems as I can within that 1 hour, 15 minutes, but it turns out that it usually is 1, 2, 4 examples. And that, of course, depends on the actual complexity of the example and the actual topic. Again, my goal is not to overthrow you with many topics at once. So depending on what the topic requires and how much variety of problems we can solve with that, I will go through at least 1 example per lecture, but most lectures have more than 2 or 3 of them. Some have 4. Important is that I usually solve the first 2, 3 ones for you, and then for the last one, if we get through 4, I will leave you an answer so that you can use that to practice your own knowledge of the application. And these increase in complexity, right? So increasing complexity. So we'll start easy and make our way up the ladder to learn more and more. All right, then once we're done with that, something that I find very important, that is what I call the checkpoint. So checkpoint. And you will see what I mean by that at the end of this lecture. I will show you what a checkpoint is in this class. But really what I'm trying to do here with you is I want to clarify or reiterate the takeaway, right? So reiterate your takeaway. So what is the stuff you should have learned from this lecture so that you can self-evaluate your knowledge and you can self-identify the parts that may still be a little bit fuzzy to you so that you can find methods to eliminate your own doubt. So this is a very important part, and I will show you how that looks like at the end of this lecture. Once the checkpoint has passed, we then have one page to each lecture that is the homework, or practice problems is really what that is. But in this class, it's considered a homework, and the homework is usually 4 to 8 problems. But generally, it's 6 problems per lecture. And these problems relate very closely to the actual lecture content. So relate closely to lecture. So this is also single focused effectively. So single focused. That means that the answer for these problems can technically be found within that lecture, right? That's the goal here of sectioning every lecture and every homework like that. So this will really help you to reiterate and strengthen and reinforce the learned knowledge from the lecture and the examples. And also the homework problems are very close to the examples. And so the goal is that you can really open one lecture with one homework and solve all your problems. Now, it's important to understand that yes, let's say we have 6 problems per lecture. You will not submit 6 problems every lecture. In fact, we have something, for example, that's called homework 2A, which is 6 problems. Then you have homework 2B, which is 6 problems. And then you have homework 2C. And together you would submit that as one homework assignment. So in other words, one homework submission is comprised of the content from 3 previous lectures. And we've done that on purpose so that you can manage your time, but yet have a good line to follow as the content becomes available. So we don't want you to submit a homework every lecture, but we need to stay on track. And that's what we're trying to achieve with this concept. Finally, since we're talking about the homework here, let me tell you one thing real quick. You will read about this in different locations in the online class more and more. But let me just tell you that your homework is based on a 4-digit ID. This is unique to every student. Every student gets an individual 4-digit ID, and you can use this to calculate numerical values. So calculate your own numbers, if you will. So why am I telling you this? Because the homework assignment, as I will show you as an example here at the end of this lecture, your homework assignment is given to you with variables. So for example, let's say you have to calculate the area content of a rectangle. Then I don't give you a rectangle with 5 meters times 4 meters. I will give you a rectangle that is, let's say, A long and B wide. And then you have a value for A, let's say that's 5 meters. And B is equal to 2 meters. And then you would use that to calculate your own homework problem. So everybody gets a conceptually similar problem. So everybody would get this rectangle, but each one of you has different numbers. And that you can find out more at different locations. But since we were talking about the homework here, I just wanted to mention that. All right, the last and final part here is not really part of the lecture, but I wanted to mention it here anyways. There's a recitation which relates one-to-one to the lecture. So for example, recitation, let's say 5, goes hand in hand with lecture 5. So, of course, that's not a surprise, but I wanted to point that out here, that you can really blindly navigate this once you buy into the concept, because this happens continuously, and then you have a recitation that relates to it as well. And that recitation, if you take the class for credit, is of course mandatory. And you can use this to actually learn more about your homework. So this is all hands-on. And usually we exemplify homework solutions. So exemplify homework solutions. So this will be a last chance to really learn the application of the knowledge. So the homework is really what should get you ready for the exams and the quizzes. But if something is fuzzy, we still have the recitation that goes hand in hand with it. And of course, we answer any questions that you have there on the hands-on approach. And we sometimes use individual problems, but most often we use some of the homework problems and we will solve them with you and for you. So this is the general lecture concept or the concept of the class, and every lecture will follow this pattern. There will be no change to that. I promise that throughout the semester, so you can take this to the bank. This is how we're going to go through the semester so that it hopefully will help you to focus on the learning and not on any administrative work.